Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Bart Hattersveld. I'm a classical riding instructor, and today I would like to talk a little bit about pressure. Now, a lot of people use pressure quite instinctively. They use it habitually, or maybe out of emotion. Some people might get a little bit more frustrated with the horse and use too much pressure as a result. And in today's video, I would like to talk a little bit about how we can use pressure in a more rational and more fair way to our horses, instead of just reacting out of emotion. So I think the most important thing to understand about pressure is that the horse decides how much is too much. Rather than saying X amount of force is too much, it really depends on the horse. There's a lot of horses that are very, very sensitive to pressure, and so a little bit of pressure might be too much already. And there's a lot of horses also that are quite dull to pressure, so we might use a little bit more pressure to explain to them that they have to react to the lighter amount of pressure. So in all my lessons, what I try to do is that we start always with the lightest amount of pressure. Even if we know that the horse doesn't respond, we still have to teach them to respond to that amount of pressure. If we get further into the details, there are 4 elements that we can vary over time. These are the amount of pressure used, the escalation, the frequency, and the duration. First, we have amount of pressure. I would like to start with the lightest amount of pressure possible and then escalate up if I need to. It is quite unwise to start with a very high amount of pressure, especially if you're on a horse that you don't really know. And that's a mistake that a lot of people make, actually, because they kind of use the same amount of pressure irrespective of what horse they're riding. Of course, if we're on a very sensitive horse, that might scare or frustrate the horse quite quickly if we start with too much of pressure on a particular aid. Another is the escalation of pressure, and this refers to how much pressure increase we have over time. When the horse doesn't really respond to our leg, we might put on leg again, and this time with more pressure. Now, it is important to realize that a gradual linear increase over time, so we start very low and we slowly increase step by step, might not work for every horse. Sometimes it's way more effective to skip a few levels, especially when the thing you're teaching is very important. Of course, we still want to keep in mind that we don't want to use too much pressure, so always look at the reaction of the horse. But it is a thing we can vary. We might go from level 1 pressure to level 2 to level 3, etc., up to level 8 or 10. Or we might choose to go from level 1 to 3 to 5 to 6, for example. You can experiment with this a little bit and see what works. Generally, I do think that this kind of increase over time works better than, like I said before, when we start immediately with a high amount of pressure. Even if the horse isn't very sensitive, this usually scares or frustrates them quite quickly. Then we come to frequency of pressure. This is another thing we can vary, and this refers to the amount of time between the subsequent aids. A lot of people make the mistake here to do a lot of aids in a very short time, and this can really quickly confuse the horse, or even, as it's called, flood them, so make them very, very stressed in a very short amount of time. Also, this might teach the horse to be quite dull to the aids. If you are, for example, riding and you give leg every stride, of course the horse might at some point just ignore it because it's just part of the riding. If you don't release the pressure when the horse is doing the right thing, or when it's going to do something that is more in the direction of the right thing, you will lose the sensitivity to the aid. Now, what I like to kind of do myself is to give the horse a little bit of time to think about the aid. So I start with a light aid and I give them 2 seconds time to think about it. 2 seconds is a rule of thumb. It can be varied, but it's in general in the beginning quite useful to start with. Then, if the horse doesn't respond, I increase the aid. The last one is duration of pressure. This refers to how long the pressure is maintained. This can also be varied and can be quite useful for things like rain aids, which are easily maintained for a longer period of time. Of course, a whip aid isn't really maintained for a long time, so it's not really applicable here. But a leg aid, for example, can be put on the horse for a longer period of time. Now, if we want to teach the horse, for example, to bend to the side, what I like to do is to keep the pressure pretty similar and just wait a minute or two. A lot of people give up quite quickly, which makes the horse also not really learn anything. So if I maintain the pressure for quite a long period of time, the horse gives a little bit, I feel the tension disappear in the rein, I give immediately. And this giving immediately is of course important because the horse kind of learns based on the release of pressure, not on the application of pressure. So now you know the 4 things that you can vary with pressure. This brings us to an important principle, which is that horses learn by taking away the pressure. A lot of the principles in riding are based on something called negative reinforcement. Basically, it means that when we apply some pressure, we also have to release it in order for the horse to learn from it. If we just apply pressure and we release the pressure at some random moment, the horse doesn't really know what to do. It can't recognize any patterns in our behavior, and so it doesn't really learn to respond to the lighter amount of pressure. Together with the idea that you always start with a light amount of pressure, this will really improve your riding if you apply it correctly. This will make your horse much more lighter on the aids. Lastly, I just would like to say something about the types of pressure. This is also a thing that we can alternate. We have a couple of types of pressure that are available to us as riders. Our hands, so any direct action on the bit. I also call this a direct rein, which affects the bit directly and the pressure into the mouth of the horse. Then we have the rein itself. This can be used against the neck to bend away or kind of move the shoulder out with the inside rein. This is also called indirect rein, as opposed to the direct rein. Then of course we have our legs. Now our legs have a big contact area with the horse. We can use our upper legs, our lower legs, our knees, and our heels. If we're wearing spurs, then we also have the spur use, of course, as another aid to use. There's a lot of nuance to the leg use, and I will make a later video about this for sure. Then we have the whip, which can be visual or tactile. So a lot of people use the whip on the horse directly by tapping the horse, but also we can use it as a visual aid, as an extension of our arm. I use this quite frequently, and basically just what I do is I show the whip on the outside and teach the horse to bend away from the whip. It's a very historical approach and it's very effective. Lastly, we have the voice. The voice can do a lot. We can emphasize an aid. We can teach the horse to do a particular gait on a voice cue. For example, my horse does Mézère on a voice cue and Piaffe on a voice cue, which can be very effective if you want to work with a student on your horse, for example, or maybe on the lunge, and you can do a lot of advanced exercises with these techniques. Now lastly, we have seat aids. Seat aids are a little bit more nuanced. It's not something you can take away, so it's always kind of there. We can use some seat aids to ask the horse particular gaits or particular movements. I think the most important thing about the seat for people to learn, especially in the beginning, is mostly to not sit in the way of the horse. A lot of horses are not fully educated schoolmasters, so I think it's much more important for people to learn first to not sit in the way and to use the aids effectively and in a correct way, rather than to focus on seat aids. I hope this helps, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm planning to make a lot more videos in the future, so if you have any thoughts or any questions, maybe some comments about this, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and see you next time.